guys and gals, me Mutahar, and I know that there's some doom scrolling today, I'm pretty sure, but ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to talk about something with video games. Now, as you all know, I'm a PlayStation guy. I play on PlayStation pretty much, whenever I touch a console. I know that some people are Nintendo people, and, all the power to you. And there's some people that play on Xbox. But for me, most of my gaming on a console is done through a PlayStation. Now, ever since the drop of the Steam Deck, which, has been one of the greatest purchases I've ever made. I've actually become more of a PC gamer again now that I can play games on my Steam Deck on the go and then just transfer the save file back and forth. But from time to time, occasionally a game will come out where I have to touch the PlayStation. And sometimes those games can be like Spider-Man 2, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the Demon's Souls remake, Final Fantasy 15. There's not a lot of fucking games that are really exclusive for the PlayStation, okay? Usually if you find something on any of the consoles, it's pretty much also on PC. So realistically, that's kind of a good thing in my opinion. That means with no exclusives, anybody can play any game they want on any platform, and that's fine. But one of the things that I found so useless was this PlayStation 5 Pro console. Now, I think this is hands down one of the more underwhelming releases. Now, if you're looking at the price, that's not a typo. That's 959 Canadian dollars, okay? Now, of course, that's, I think, 700 American, all right? But for Canada, when you want to buy this system, it's a grand minimum. Now, if you're looking carefully, you're like, whoa, Muda, there's no disk drive available for it. Meaning that if you're somebody that collects physical media, like me, or takes advantage of serious sales on physical media, like me, then you're pretty much reliant on the PlayStation Store in order to operate. Now, yes, I know, you can buy actual, disk drives. The problem with that, ladies and gentlemen, is the disk drives are currently out of sale, and they've been out of sale for a little bit, okay? So you pretty much have to go to eBay and hope to God. Jim Bob's got a scalped copy over here. Drop $129 for this guy and also pay $42 in shipping. You want to ram it in my ass a little harder too? All right? You want to fuck me a little bit on that one? Jesus. But yeah, this is one of those things where obviously it's a pretty expensive console to be getting into. But I wanted to talk about it now that some of the reviews have been out. Now, obviously, if you've been following, the graphical enhancements on these games have started to come out. So around the release date for this, there's going to be 50 plus something games that actually have PlayStation 5 Pro enhancements. So meaning that the developers have actually dug into the game and updated it with enhancements that take advantage of this actual system. So to remind the audience of what exactly the PlayStation 5 Pro has, it has something known as Spectral Super Resolution, which is like DLSS or a hardware accelerated version of upscaling. So you run the game at 1440p, but it upscales it to 4K. And unless you're somebody that has their eyeballs glued to the screen, which you probably do if you want to discern any graphical difference between these games, then yeah, you'll get better performance. You'll get a 4K image at, from a lower resolution. Now, of course, the further you go down, you've also got optimized console performance, so you can reach more higher and consistent frame rates, meaning that those 60 FPS modes just work better because of the sheer performance boosts of the actual GPU provided. And when it comes to advanced ray tracing, apparently the system does 2 to 3 times better ray tracing than what we currently have. The current level of PlayStation ray tracing is so fucking minimal and bare bones that it might not even exist. There's literally only one game, to my knowledge, that actually makes a tangible difference in visual quality, and that would just be Spider-Man 2. Everything else literally uses the least amount of ray tracing, or maybe one feature that is genuinely tough to tell in normal gameplay. Add the cost of 30 frames. So instead of a 60 frame experience, you can have a slightly better looking experience at half the frame rate. Most people, statistically, will just pick the higher frame rate option because smoother gameplay is better than, sluggish gameplay. So this is what's apparently different in this situation, boys, okay? Yeah, the CPU is effectively the same, except for maybe a 10% boost at certain times, from what I understand. The GPU is a 16.7 teraflop custom AMD Radeon GPU and 2 gigs of additional memory. Now, I've seen some PC gamers go, wow, dude, my computer has 82.5 teraflops. And then you look up the GPU and it's like an RTX 4090, which again, wow, look at the price tag on that motherfucker. $2,649. It's like the cheapest you can go, okay? So yeah, no shit, your actual graphics card that uses more power than the entire console you're comparing it to and costs over double the price is obviously going to be stronger, all right? Most people on PC games don't even have a 4090 to begin with, okay? So in that regard, all right, comparisons like this, I just wanted to call out as being incredibly brain dead. So anyways, to go back to the actual thing, I wanted to show you some comparison footage now that people have been reviewing it like Digital Foundry. And it's not exactly looking crazy. So one of the actual things released like a couple days ago by PlayStation was like the Spider-Man team showing the actual game. Now, I swear when I saw this video, I was trying to wonder, I'm like, wait a minute, what is this so fundamentally different in comparison to the game that I played literally like, what, like several months ago on the actual PlayStation 5? And I'll be real, in motion, it doesn't actually look all that different, all right? And again, it's one of those things where if you have to like consistently point out what's different, then maybe it's just not that crazy of a change. So I decided to go onto the internet and look for some key screenshots, and one of them posted by somebody who apparently had like a build earlier shows that yes, this is the PlayStation 5 version of Spider-Man with ray tracing enabled. Now, this is the 30 FPS mode, and you can see the ray tracing means that when something isn't in view, you can see a reflection of it on actual reflective surfaces. Without ray tracing, this would just be like a cube map or like a generic image that we would laugh at. You wouldn't even be able to see this reflection of Spider-Man that's casting rays like this. So you can see the back of the head, and again, the back of the head. So something that isn't visible, isn't forced onto this reflection through like screen space methods. This is true ray tracing, and in theory, like in actuality, it looks genuinely fun to play. This is why I say Spider-Man 2 is a good example, because, you know, ziplining through like Manhattan and the big glass like skyscrapers, that's where you can genuinely see a real visual difference. Now, comparing it to the PlayStation 5 Pro, this is an off like camera screenshot because it's overly saturated. Somebody literally pointed the camera over to the actual screen and took a photo. And I don't know, maybe the actual system like denied video sharing rights just because the game wasn't, I don't know, technically out. But anyways, you can see visually the ray tracing. It might be marginally better, but yeah, it's nothing like mind-blowingly different. Now, I'm going to assume this is running at like 60 frames a second, which is the big thing, right? Like obviously with a system like this, you want to be able to do some of these crazy graphical features at those high frame rates. So I started to look at other actual screenshots, and it kind of all like mirrors the same. This is Alan Wake 2, running on the original PlayStation 5 apparently, and you can see that the reflections don't really look crazy. If you look at the actual PS5 Pro, you can see the reflections are properly ray traced. You can see actually things in the background, the front of Alan Wake's face, other characters. It's actually pretty interesting. Now, if this performance drops down during play, which apparently it seems to, then is it really worth the actual cost to your frame rate just for these reflections? So then you start to look at things like Hogwarts Legacy, and apparently this is the game running at 60 frames with no real issues, and then allegedly here's the game running with that ray tracing, so you see like the reflection on the ground and whatnot. Yeah, this is running at like half the frame rate, okay? And of course there's other things that are different too, like if you compare between the shots, you can see things like shadows being a little different. That might just be things like time of day, but yeah, there are some other actual improvements beyond just the ray tracing, at least visually speaking. So then this is where like the real issue comes out. So Digital Foundry, the mad lads here, uploaded a goddamn 80-minute feature-length review of this console. And this is where like the real, like, I guess you could say, disappointing part came out to me. Now, what they decided to look at was things like CPU-bound games, which were games that are typically open world, where the CPU is the limiting deciding factor, right? It doesn't matter how much GPU power your system has. If you can't use your, CPU to actually process the game logic at 60 ticks a second, then you're never going to reach those 60 frames per second. So they show Baldur's Gate 3, which typically this is during Act 3 when you actually get to Baldur's Gate. You're looking at maybe like 2 frames on average higher than the actual basic PlayStation. And this is at the performance mode, by the way, too. So this is not something that I think is actually all that great. And the reason why it doesn't excite me going in further into it is because I don't actually think this is going to matter for really massive titles that people are probably ending up picking the system for, like Grand Theft Auto 6. So when you look at things like Elden Ring, it's even wilder too, because like with Elden Ring, The game is running at like PlayStation 5 quality mode over here. So this game doesn't have any patches. Just by the raw power of the system, they're getting all the way from 38 to 49. So in some cases, it doesn't even really hit that 60 frames per second, which I think is actually a shame. And now to give credit, Elden Ring is an incredibly unoptimized fucking garbage game in that regard. Seriously, if you fire it up on your PC right now, even with my system, like great CPU, top of the line GPU, I still actually have issues running that game and locking to like sometimes 60, maybe 120 frames per second. So yeah, this is not the perfect end-all be-all pro system, and I really feel like for the first time, at least me personally speaking, I have finally seen that graphics ceiling, right? Now, the Pro systems didn't just start at PlayStation 5, they did it with like PS4 Pro as well, and even then it's like, look, unless you had like a 4K television, which people started to really get towards the time of its release, that's when I guess people started to notice, yes, things are slightly sharper, and by the time you got to the end with Cyberpunk 2077, it was probably the only last-gen system that would actually run the game at like 30 frames, as compared to like the base PlayStation 4, which might be one of the most embarrassing showcases of any system usage from any video game company out there. But now with the PlayStation 5 Pro, it's almost like they want to go for 8K, 120 FPS, which, you know, if you ever talk to somebody, like, have you ever met anybody that actually has an 8K television? Dude, I don't know anybody at all, even the most tech enthusiast people in my entire circle, that have bought an 8K television, let alone with 120 frames per second. So I don't really know what Sony's trying to go for. And again, with every single screenshot and video clip that I've seen, I honestly have not ever seen anything that is worth purchasing the system for. Everything that this game, everything that the system is showing is something that might be slightly sharper than whatever you're playing on PlayStation 5. Now, if this was a situation where, like, you know, the CPU got updated, where, like, you know, a lot of these games could actually go from 30 to 60 FPS, that would be genuinely awesome. Now, games like Grand Theft Auto 6 that I brought up, you know, if you look at certain screenshots like this is going to be insane. And this is one of the reasons why, you know, the PS5 Pro is a disappointment in this regard, because if you're going to expect a game like this to run at 60 FPS, it's just never going to happen. The amount of NPCs on the screen, like if you look at this corner, this homeless guy is interacting with these three girls that are all sharing their logic together. If you're looking at the amount of traffic on the road itself, people crossing the traffic, you know, interacting with other characters in the environment, this is stuff that honestly, I don't even think the PlayStation 5 Pro is going to be touching at 30. Honestly, looking at this, I would actually be surprised if even the PlayStation like 5 base touches 30 frames consistently on this. It actually looks that genuinely impressive. So aside from that, there's a couple other boons to this as well too, where like if you look at actual like people discovering their systems, they found that there are some features where like they actually have like a game boost for like PlayStation 4 stuff. So immediately, the community that hungers for Bloodborne decided to actually run this feature. And mind you, this isn't a really experimental feature. Nobody even designed this for like games to begin with yet. So they threw it into like Bloodborne, and they found that sometimes, in certain cases, things can look sharper. So if you look at the sword real carefully, the textures look slightly sharper. Now, whether that's because the upscaler is just better in general, I don't think this is ever touching the actual game code logic or rendering pipeline in any way. So everything that I'm seeing over here doesn't necessarily shock or blow me away, but maybe it's nice. It's a nice boon to have. Unless these features start like turning these games into 60 frame experiences, as Bloodborne should have been, as it could have patched to be, even on the base PlayStation 5, if Sony gave a fuck, then yeah, this might be one interesting thing to go down. But ultimately speaking, I think one of the only disappointing things for me really watching this is the fact that this really is probably the weakest update to any system that I've seen in a while. And you know what, like, I give the PlayStation 4 the pass here because, like, even back in the PS4's, like, release, at the point that they were releasing the PS4 Pro, you're talking about a system that already had some pretty awesome releases under its belt. You know, you got games like Bloodborne, you had literal, like, actual jaw-dropping releases like Horizon Zero Dawn when it came out, before the remastering of today's day and age, as if that fucking game needed a remaster. You had, again, brilliant FPS games like Killzone Shadowfall that still look beautiful to this day. You had tons of actual game titles like Red Dead Redemption 2 that actually did take a benefit visually from coming out on the PlayStation 4 Pro after its obvious like hardware release. But even with like the PS5 right now, it really feels like the games that we've gotten, at least in this generation, don't really utilize the PlayStation 5 to its abilities. Like, if you look at a lot of these cross-platform games, like even Call of Duty Black Ops 6, dude, that game is still dropping on the base Xbox One and PlayStation 4. It really still feels like a lot of the games that come out, especially games like Yakuza Infinite Wealth, or, you know, recently there was this Refantasio Metaphor, I think, the game. Yeah, that alone also comes out on PS4. So it's like a lot of these like PS5 games, when you look at like them also releasing on the 4, it's like, bro, we're literally still using a system that's like a PS4 Pro at this point. And so realistically, the games that are even exclusive to the PlayStation 5, they look really good, all right? Some of them use ray tracing pretty effectively. And then you look at the actual comparisons to the PS5 Pro, and it really is just like nothing that is jaw-dropping in general. I think for the price you're looking at over here, it might be a decent buy. But even with them removing that disc tray, it really shows that Sony is consistently trying to push the digital-only verse that I am not a fan of. I don't think anybody should be a fan of. And I think if it's any time that you should ever consider purchasing a PC or maybe gaming on that platform instead, it's probably now. PC gaming is about as easy as it's ever been. And given the fact that the prices here are starting to etch towards a PC gaming system anyways, like a mid-range gaming computer that even if you spend a little bit more money on, you get like way more usability out of, okay? You can make content on it. You can do actual work on it, things like programming. You can do a million other things than just play video games or watch Netflix. So we're really getting to a point where like these systems are just not impressive. And honestly, it's like the fact that they are so underutilized, in my opinion, from a gameplay perspective, where like the games that are dropping on it, even games like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, like bro, that you can't tell me that game is blowing anyone's minds away. It's something that looks like an expanded release that could have honestly dropped on the PlayStation 4 anyways. So yeah, even with like a lot of the games coming out, you're not looking at something innovative until and unless you wait for GTA 6 to drop like end of next year. But literally any of the games that are coming on now just feel like more enhanced releases that you would have found on the PlayStation 4 base Xbox Ones or Xbox One X's and just moved on from there. But yeah, the PlayStation 5 Pro's been a bit of a disappointment. It's one thing that I honestly expected was going to be a disappointment. I think if you're somebody that literally only cares about like resolutions and visuals, yeah, this might be a marketable boost for you. I think the system's probably a decent buy if you've got serious money to burn and you don't currently have a PlayStation 5 already. If you have a PlayStation 5 right now, I honestly cannot fathom anybody thinking of upgrading the system when the games themselves, you know, none of them warrant needing the upgrade to begin with anyways. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to talk about it because, yeah, you know, I like gaming. You know, I like good graphics. But $1,000 for a marginal upgrade? I don't know about that one, dog. Anyways, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it or dislike it. I am out.